Aloha, and welcome to another episode of the Groundswell Origins podcast, where I connect you to outstanding humans and sustainable ideas. I'm your host, Scott Martin. Today, we have the person who wrote the book on the go-to market. It's called The Go-To Market Strategist. Maja Voje is the author that just came out with this book, and she has just incredible pragmatic strategic thinking based on military strategy that she's sort of blended in with like looking at the expansive amount of different strategies for going to market. And for scruffy startups or even bigger companies that are trying to be really pragmatic about the way that they spend money and try to really understand their product market fit, this is the product market fit pragmatic conversation that you probably want to hear. It's was really enjoyable talking with her. We share a lot of alignment in what's going on in terms of growth and how things are shifting. And as budgets get harder and audiences get more difficult to reach, this is going to be a pretty critical podcast for you to time into. So without further ado, let's paddle in. All right, here we are paddling in with Maja Voje. Voje?
Something
Did I
like
get
this. Thank you
something
so
like
much,
that? Yeah.
Scott. It's a
Welcome.
pleasure to meet you and your community. I mean, you have so many amazing people from product, from agencies, from marketing. And hey, I wrote in the first chapter of your book that you don't like growth hacking that much. So it should be a fun conversation.
Yes. Well, it's like let's just jump into that. I mean, it's the growth hacking. I think I was reading a post that you had about it, about don't talk to your investors about growth hacking, and it's just I resonated with me as well. I think we have a lot of alignment, and I think that sets the stage for, like, I mean, when I was reading a lot of your posts about your new book that just came out, by the way, congratulations, the Go to Market Strategist.
Following your
Um,
great book footsteps, you know how it is when you are the first time author, you just look up to others.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And now it's like the journey is, for me anyways, was after I write my first book. Now it's going to be easier to write my second because now I learned how to write a book. You know what I mean? Where the first time was like tough. So, so let's talk about you and your book. So you've written this. You just released this book. You've been giving incredible value, showing little pieces of it on LinkedIn, and one of the pieces that I saw was about growth hacking. Well, let's just jump right into that, about our shared sort of understanding of growth hacking. No offense to the Sean Ellis and hacking growth. It's more about the generalization. Why don't you talk a little bit about what your point of view is on that?
Fantastic. So let's start with what we probably agree on. So we agree on scientific method. We agree that we need evidence and proof in order to make decision. Like there is nothing wrong with experimentation process that we are running. However, I see like two-layer problem here. The first part of the equation is that the very much like when it comes to GTM, a lot of companies don't have large enough sample sizes, right? So if you have like 50 people per week on your website, you cannot conduct a legitimate A/B test. It's impossible, and probably it's better that you do customer interviews or personal selling. It's fine. The other piece of the equation is just like what happened with the discipline development and who is it attracting, because I am all for like Francis Bacon's scientific method. This is near and dear to me, but just like 10 things how to do SEO blaze of your silver bullet website, it's something that I can personally not resonate with because I don't like shortcuts. I mean, I love them obviously, but I don't believe that they exist and they are like repeatable. So whenever somebody puts like growth hacking in their investment deck, I literally think that they don't have verified channels and just like something that is still under discovery, something that is still being tested, because the majority of GTM businesses should rely on 2 to 3 channels that are proven to work and have some traction. So therefore, whenever I say like that marketing should be led at growth hacking and something, I'm hooray, okay, in 10 to 20% you can do it, but 80% of your efforts, you should just be focusing on things that work and things that scale, because you will be needing a lot of this once you move forward. So that is my perspective on it, and if you have anything to add, I would love to learn from you as well.
Yeah, we're in alignment. The what I've seen is the cultural field around marketing is the predominant point of view is 10x grow fast, follow these growth hacks. And I used to be one of those. I call myself a recovering growth hacker. I don't do that anymore because it's like you're taking the business off a cliff because you have expectations that you're going to be able to maintain or scale, and it doesn't work. And so this what I believe is what's the enemy of at least my work, and I'm seeing some references to that in your work, is that long-term thinking will actually create more gains even in the short term. And most people are so enamored with looking at their feet, they're looking for it on these hacks. They're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies, trying to find these shortcuts. And that's what I think is pervasive. Is even with AI, people are looking at, oh, how this can be a shortcut, but they're missing all the other pieces of what the unintended consequences of these decisions. So when I see your work, I just noticed that you gave this really beautiful example of Jeffrey Moore's work, which is called Crossing the Chasm. And you redefined it. And when you, by the way, when you're listening to, I know that you just used the acronym GTM. GTM means go to market, just for those listening.
Oh,
So we're going to
sorry.
use
I'm
that.
so sorry. I didn't
That's okay.
explain this. Thanks for doing
No,
that,
no,
Jerry.
just be in your flow. I just want to make sure everybody understands so we can go forward and we can kind of really move through this. So it's
Cool.
like your GTM strategy overlaid over top of Jeffrey Moore's crossing the chasm theory is really beautiful, and I think it speaks to when people do these short term growth hacks. There's also an audience hack, which is you get a false positive on your early adopters, your innovators, and you think that that's the growth is going to projection is going to go, and it doesn't go that way. Maybe to explain sort of your thinking, what your research has shown in your book, and that schema, if you will.
Super. When it comes to just like the CASA model and something like that, I would put another very important piece into our discussion, that like whatever gets measured gets managed, right? So if you say that you need 500 signups for beta, you can go and like shit post on Reddit. That's not a problem. You can even pay like a guy from Philippines in order to get these signups for you. But are they high quality? Like, will they actually convert to consumers? And just like before we hopped to record this, I was downstairs with a group of like 100 freelancers, and one guy just like said, "Hey, today I sent out 1,000 spam mails. You know what? I got rejected 30 times." And I was like, "Oh, Jesus, you are dealing with a brand here and you are doing this to your potential prospects. Wouldn't it be better to just like narrow it down to like batches of 50, do personalized emails, and try to develop like any sort of meaningful relationship if you are selling a service which is like 50K?" I just think that this is like off putting, right? And when it comes to the chasm, I think it's really, really, really interesting because early adopters are usually with you on the product vision, right? So whatever you are doing, whether you have like conversion design optimization agency, or if you are building the next big CRM, which is AI driven or something like that, first people will probably have a very high pain point, enthusiasm for the technology. They will probably also like you as a founder, so there will be like a certain personality fit, and they're like kind of want to chase on for the latest and greatest, right? So they feel a lot of pride that they are like early innovators. And where you find them is not scalable yet for your go-to market, because usually those people are in social media groups. Maybe you meet them at some events, maybe you get referred to them, or they just find you because they are always on the seek out for the latest and greatest. And just like it's so important to learn from them, because they will be happy to provide feedback, and they will also be like very forgiving if the product has or the service has like some sort of mistakes, right? If you treat them well, they will be like amazing early ambassadors, but usually they are not sizable enough in order to help you do the real business, right? Eventually, you have to cross this plateau of whatever your mom, your friends, your colleagues, and tech enthusiasts buy for you. And you would have to build marketing and sales engines that are a little bit more predictable. When I say predictable, I am aiming towards like early majority. So these are the customers that you don't know, you don't have like proximity towards, but you can attract them at predictable scale. And then we bump into this interesting concept of product market fit. And for me, like coming from Europe, when there are not a lot of investment, I always say that product market fit as well as like willingness to pay. So we are bootstrapping mainly here in Europe, and we need to defend business model and product market fit if the market wants our product at the same time in order to survive, right? So it's very, very, very interesting because sometimes people say that they love something and they would use it, but my question, my logical question is, of course, would they pay for it? Like, would they actually swipe their credit card and pay for this subscription? And this is what I am increasingly encouraging my teams to do, because you know what is 1000 euros users if your bank account is still €0 or $0? I mean, it's a nice vanity metric, maybe it can help you attract some investment, but at the end of the day you haven't proven the business model yet, right? And as you are expanding, and just like coming from this romantic stage of early adopters, when you have these amazing feedback loops and you probably know all their phone numbers and know them by their personal names, when you get a little bit broader, it's a challenge because you have to build processes, how to do sales and marketing more repeatedly. And also, you have to open other target segments, which in most cases do not really resonate with the same channels and with same acquisition techniques that your early adopters were. So that for me is interesting.
Yeah, there's different resonance between the different groups. So you're a product market fit expert. Go to market, and when you're thinking about your the audience that's listening, what is like from your book? What is probably the single biggest important driver for people to think about? If you were going to go, let me summarize my book in sort of like a summary, and here's how it really begins. Let me kind of walk through some of those concepts because we went right into the chasm theory and sort of the growth hacking and the downfalls of following the short term. Let's maybe start right with the broader concept so people can understand product market fit and the go to market strategy. If you could kind of define that, that'd be great.
Cool. So I define go to market strategy a little bit broader than most people. So it's whenever you are searching to find a place for your product, service, or digital product on the market, and you kind of have to find this market segment which will literally say shut up and take my money. It doesn't matter if you are launching, if you are relaunching, or if you are just like expanding. The beauty of GTM for me is that there are more unknowns than knowns. So you have like multiple questions. You don't know to whom exactly are you selling yet, what the price should be, which channel should you be choosing, like what is the exact product that will serve them well, and multiple other things. And you discover this in iteration, right? And in my philosophy, it all starts with a selection of target audience. So customer is always in the center. Why? Because you know you should be shaping your products towards what will actually deliver them value. Price is just like a
Right.
unit, an exchange unit of this value. And channel, you know, go where the audience is. This is where you'll find them. Don't force them to do something that they don't like, because it's probably not gonna work. And just like by putting customer research and knowing your customer at the center of our attention, I think that like you can literally learn everything else on a go. You have your product vision, you have like this roadmap that you would like to follow, of course, because you're a visionary founder and a visionary innovator, and that's fine. But just like from the grounds out, I really think that I created a beautiful piece of work for people who are tackling multiple insecurities and want to make decisions with a little bit more confidence than just like, you know, okay, I think we should do this. So there is a research component to it, there is a validation component to it, and there are just like best practices based on very real examples. So I didn't go and just like follow what X company did like 15 years ago, because this I don't think it's very relevant. It can be inspirational, but you cannot copycat this in modern world. So yeah, I just felt that marketing is so much more than what we're saying, right? Even Philip Kotler, he has 4P, of course, no 4P concepts. And we are spending so much time thinking about channels and so little time talking about product pricing and like promotional part is that, but let's say channel how we deliver the service. And I just went back to the basics, acknowledging that all these pieces matter and just being centered around the customer in order to find this focal point, how to nail the moving particles of this equation.
And so, what is this all based on? Is it based on all your client work, research, combination? What's the, give us a little bit of the, because I know there's a lot of depth here. So, share with us like how, like this is steeped in a lot of, you know, real data. So, you want to share a little bit about that?
Oh, my pleasure. So I actually wrote three versions of this book. The first version was kind of like this war diary. It was like 3 years ago, I was working with this client and this happened. And I was like, shit, nobody's gonna read this. I mean, it's boring, it's no longer relevant. Okay. So I said that I should be way more scientific. And I went and I kind of shaped this very weird narrative that okay, if you are doing like assumption mapping, you could be using this or maybe a double amendment. And it was like a kind of very weird work. It was almost like encyclopedia of all these concepts that product managers and the rest of my cool folks were familiar with. I was doing a lot of interviews on the go. So I did over 50 interviews for the book. And overall, I had more than 100 experts reviewing all the chapters. And I mean, they were ruthless. Nobody was very kind to me at this stage, and they shouldn't be because we were trying to make the best product. And then I came to the realization that like people don't need this weird encyclopedia of like gazillion concepts and mental models. They need a recipe. They literally need a proven sequence of how to do something that reliably works for the majority of companies. And I did the third version, the final version, as the progression. Every chapter at the end has a to do list. There are like 17 mirror templates and just like different spreadsheets that people can use. And this, I think, is the hugest differentiator because my book doesn't even have introduction. It's just like, okay, you're going to market. I know you're panicking. You should set up some objectives and then we'll go to the next chapter. Because I kind of feel that people have very limited bandwidth slash time to waste, and I want it to be as concrete as zero bullshit as possible. And I was challenging like this with multiple different people, so it's not just like my European critical thinking, it's a hive.
It's you're very pragmatic. This is the get right to it, brass tacks book for
You know what
sure.
my mom said? My mom said that this is the PhD that I will never have.
It's true. I mean, it's like really, it's the, and by the way, what is a PhD? I mean, like you have a PhD in results, right? Like that's really what you've done. You've got a like some people have PhDs from you know university. This is a PhD in pulling this together, but in total results and a very pragmatic approach. So
Ah,
I
Scott,
think
at least people are reading it. You know, most PhD theses are never read.
yeah, totally. They just sit on a shelf. You don't even read it, right? So it's like the usefulness of it is great. So it's a lot of these models. You know, someone that's listening and they're thinking about, can you give us an example of a model, which is something that if I'm listening, I'm kind of getting my head around on the effectiveness of your methodology that you've just you know discovered, unearthed, and created that they could then you know sort of like put in their mind's eye and then go, I could apply this right now. What would be the model that would be one that you would love to describe?
Mhm. It's willingness to pay, and testing and pre-sale because, like,
So
I can
willingness to
sell.
pay. So the people's,
Mhm.
because that is a big problem, right? People go,
Oh yeah.
how big is the market, and who's willing to pay? This is a huge problem because people are
Mhm.
guessing on pricing. So yeah, okay, I'd love to hear this.
Cool. So, coming from my very bootstrappy, like very, let's say, down to earth background, for me, it's very, very, very resource intensive to invest into product building, right? So, as soon as I have any sort of tangible product form, it can be a PDF, it can be like a Google Doc, it can be a presentation, I would go and sell it. And I don't allow myself to put any money into the marketing before I'm firm that I can pitch this to person like, and they would buy it. And this is so very interesting because, there are always a bunch of different research methodology, and you can like do this with survey, like, would you pay X for this? Would you pay Y for this? Would you build, but that doesn't mean like that you actually have a result there. Nobody paid shit at this point. So I am very, very, very much into like pre-sales and making sure that whatever form of the product, we would like to validate that we have this initial feedback loop of who is buying it. For example, I right now am developing a new training program, and I think that it is for technical founders and product managers, but I have to test this assumption, right? I actually have to write it in like a Google Doc or a PDF or in Notion. I have to put a price on it. Of course, I would like to pre-test it usability test wise with a couple of colleagues that are into this segment before I would go and spray it all out. But nevertheless, I always have these limits. Look, if you don't sell at least 5 of these programs, then you shouldn't be bothering. Like, you shouldn't be developing this, or you should learn something else and do this repeatably, because this one doesn't have the right to survive right now. It's not
So,
well
would you
thought
sell it
or maybe
before you've
not
created
created.
it?
Exactly.
So what if you sell it and you haven't created it and you decide you're not going to do it? Do you just give their money
I
back? Is
return
that
the money.
yeah? Okay. So what you're saying is you create a
It's,
phantom product
yep.
that to kind of as a straw argument and see if there's any response with your audience. Is that what you're saying?
It's not even a phantom product. It can just like be an idea, and like
Hmm.
you can even like make your clients co-create this product with you. But I'm always thinking, like, if I cannot get somebody enthusiastic about this, if it doesn't deliver value, if nobody is like willing to put money on the table, and I mean, I'm not selling like data transmit from satellites from the universe. Like, things that I sell are pretty simple to understand, and I'm always just like challenging myself. Is this product survivable? Like, can I do it? Can I sell it organically without any budget? Am I good at presenting it, or do we still need to have some additional work? And this is how I made probably the best decision in my product work, because if, look, even for the book, I just recorded like a loom video, presented a couple of ground concepts, mapped their response of how they responded with the content or not, and learn a whole lot things about my persona. Ever, if you have data, you can reverse engineer. You have evidence, you can make good decisions. But otherwise, you're building in isolation, and you are probably wasting like a lot of time and money going into direction which is not necessarily going to land well on the market. Maybe I'm paranoid in that perspective, but this is how I like to think, because I need feedback loops as a person.
Yeah. Well, and it's also an investment, right? You think of the capital. So so
And
in my
opportunity cost, there is opportunity cost to everything that you do.
yeah, well, yeah, without question. In my book, you and I share the same philosophy. In my book, I call it an active strategy. And an active strategy is far too often when I've done strategies with people or I've been part of strategies, is there's this big hypothesis. We are going to do this, and everybody in the boardroom's all excited, and they're like, "Oh, this sounds amazing!" Until they actually try to apply it, and either the design that they created was so off, then they got to redesign it. It expands the cost of your investment. So what I try to do is go, what can we do to get proof of concept? Listen, how can we, while we're still planning, we're not stopping and just doing this proof of concept. So I
Yep,
go, what part of our strategy is either the weakest that we need or the most expensive that we need to get some validation? It can be a small amount, so while we're doing the planning, we can kind of get feedback and use that to inform the strategy. And I call it an active strategy. Like, so it's active. You're
love it.
actively going out and doing it. And so with you, in your model, when you're talking about sort of like, is it selling or can it just be other indicators? Because for me, I'm not that's interesting because I think that that's not something I've always pushed for. Going, we need to prove we can sell it. It's more, is there interest in the market? What is like? It's like testing the idea. Has it got like legs? And so runs the span from purchasing or just like activating or interacting. Where do you? Is it only on purchase? Is that the only way you want to test things, or what's your methodology?
It depends on the level of confidence and like the state of maturity of the product/service that I am developing, right? At the early
Hmm.
stages, customer interviews or like some sort of polls, like some sort of surveys are okay just to give you the initial signals. But I would never live on anecdotal proof. And I very much prefer to reverse engineer audiences that at least like join the wait list. And this is what I did
Yeah.
for the book as well, right? Before I launched, I had a wait list of 3,000 people, and immediately, like day one of pre-sale, we got like 500 purchases, which guess what, made an Amazon bestseller because people were just like hyped for the launch. And it was one of the smartest decisions, not just like in terms of testing, but also in terms of getting this algo push, which was so important for the launch because I launched without any budget. I like to do that. I live very dangerous life. I wouldn't mind like pouring like 5K in ads or something like that, but this is like the natural pride. Hey, can I do it for free? It's just fun.
Hmm.
So I was very, very, very tangible about this, but not before did I like really saw the purchases. Was I at peace with my decision? Because people can
Yeah.
subscribe to whatever shit you can come up with, but next week they will forget that you exist. So whereas you can fool yourself that okay, you have a wait list of 5,000 people through this year, I can guarantee you that like 50% of those emails are not going to be open, and half of people who will open will no longer remember you or just like keep this relevant. So I am very, 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 very nasty when it comes to this because I'm bootstrapping, and for me, just like the level of evidence that I have to collect is a little bit stronger. However, if I would be working with like larger customers, I would make sure that I keep them regularly updated and that they have like this sense of progression that something is going on. Wouldn't mind doing like a private beta, initiating them in order to participate there with either their feedback, like with some insights at the events or something like that. My key point of view here is just like if they are signing up for something, they should be entertained. They should be like engaged, activated. It's your job to do this.
It's the bootstrapping. That's I think the piece there is like how many marketers or sorry, C suites, they think they're bootstrapping, but their team is not giving them a bootstrapping strategy. What you're describing is a true bootstrap. Like we have limited funds, we can't fuck around. And
Mm,
I used to spend tons of time. I'm curious what your point of view is, so I'm going to tell you my story real quick. Is
sure.
I used to spend tons of time doing market research and researching with customers and stuff. And what I found was the research lied all the fucking time. It's like they would say they were going to do this, but they wouldn't actually buy, or they would say that they haven't. It's just, and so there's so many people that are so heavy on the research side that it's almost like they fall in love with the research versus a more like you say, like taking a step over. It's one thing to say yes to something, it's another thing to actually pay for it. That is a chasm. It's not like 1-2. It's like there's a big space between the two, and that's what my
Love
experience
it.
has been. I don't know what yours is and what your thoughts are on research. I do love research, but there's a degree of like skepticism I have because I've been burned so many times.
Scott, I think we are boring because we agree too much. But
Oh.
nevertheless, an additional piece of the puzzle that I could bring to the conversation, which I think it adds value to your audience, is just like with whom are you testing? So, what's the quality of the sample? Because in GTM, go to market, like you have certain hypotheses who's your target audience, right? And if you are doing it like on a wrong sample size, you could be getting like really falsified information. And you might kill a good product or you create a zombie that nobody will actually like on the market. So we usually start these research rounds with, let's say, 3 to 4 target market hypotheses, right? So it can either be for product managers, it can either be for CMOs, or it can be for like independent business owners. Okay, I have a couple of hypotheses. I wouldn't like to narrow it down on a single target audience just yet. So let me go and play with all these free audiences and see who has willingness to pay, who has strong pain point levels and whom can I actually reach, because people have to be realistic here. If you have never said anything in your life to a medical company or something like that, it's highly unlikely that you will go there by sending like 500 cold emails. It's just not how people buy, right? So the proximity is very, very, very important as well. As okay, there are other criteria that I like to take into consideration here, but first is the sanity check of just like exploring which segments do you have a fighting chance in, what is obtainable to you, and what looks good, at least from the outside. Then you go inside and kind of explore to get more insights. At that stage, you can learn who can actually take a decision there. So, what is the decision unit look like? So, who is making these decisions in a company, for example? You can have like an indication what sales cycles are you looking at, because some sales cycles are 3 years, some are next week, and that varies heavily how you will be doing your unit economics and just like overall business projections. And last but not least, what I am searching for here is just like people who are shut up and take my money. Like, why wasn't this like available yesterday? I want to have it. Like tomorrow, if you can implement, I'm so sorry that I didn't have it before. It doesn't happen 100%, but when you find this golden nugget in your research, the next question is, are there more people like this? And then how can I attract them into my ecosystem? And whereas this sound like serendipity, I think that it is crucial not to narrow down your research like on a specific segment, because you might be missing on some opportunities from a get-go if you don't keep it a little bit broader. And research is worth for how much you pay for it. So I always like to invite them to just like do specific actions. So if they are interviewed, join the beta. If they are like surveyed, like you have a coupon code here, you can get early bird price, whatever. So it's not like research per se. I always try to convey it in my sales and marketing funnel as well. I'm being very strategic about this, because usually like the conversion rate from research to actual sales, like I've seen numbers such as like 50 or 60%, right? Because people whom you are listening, people who give you insights, they are interested in your product, obviously, or you created a little bit of an IKEA effect and they are like more invested in this now. So I'm always testing these conversion mechanisms as well. Maybe I'm being like a little bit unconventional here again, but like I just spent half an hour talking with somebody. So what's a takeaway here? Of course, number of insights is a wonderful metric to monitor, but you know what? If I could get another beta tester, that's even better. So why not trying that?
Interesting. It's almost like, hey, there's response to your question, opinion, them sharing it, but you're pairing it in with action, which is actually makes sense because people without everybody has an opinion. A lot of people respond to it, but will they take action actually as somebody that's making the opinion? That actually could be in itself going, how much do you value that person's opinion if they're not even willing to take action on this? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually interesting. And what I want to go back to was you said something really interesting, proximity. I think I've never heard anybody, you're the first person to say this, except for Tony Robbins, his proximity is power. I've always thought, I get people that come to me and go, I want to go to market with this new product. I'm going, have you ever sold that? Do you even know that audience? Do you understand that industry? And they're like, no, but it's really hot. Like, I think it's gonna be great. And I'm like, you have no idea what you're stepping into.
Exactly.
And
That's a fair
so
advice.
tell me a little bit about your proximity strategy, because I think that that is something that so many people, they chase things and they're in their business, and with their customers they're going off in a different direction because they think it should be, when they're really, they have no proximity to it. This, I think, is actually something I've never heard from anybody. You're the first person. Tell me about your proximity thinking.
Yes, I
I
nailed
love
it.
it. That's really
Half an hour
cool.
in.
Well, no, I
Okay,
mean, you've heard lots of stuff is original from you. It's incredible, but this one's super original. I mean, it's like I've kind of thought it, but I've never said it out loud.
Um, no, for me, it's all about creating this fighting chance, right? If I say today that I want to go and work for NASA or like European Space Agency, you would probably tell me good luck because I don't know a single person there, and they would
Hmm.
probably not that well respond on my cold LinkedIn messages. So it's just like either I like to say to people that your first 5 or 10 customers are usually in your phone book, right? So if you're coming from your strengths, and this is the fundamental of the winning strategy, to come from your strengths and just like work with whatever you have. And these are just like some things that you don't have many things, but whatever strengths you have, it's good for you. You should embrace it. And there is like a certain intercept of how you are not stuck on the same industry or on the same social circle that you have, because there are adjacent segments that you could be addressing. And whatever you have, like I first try to build evidence. Why? Because it's trust. We speak today for the very first time, and for me it's not fair to assume that you trust me, because it takes 70 hours to build trust and we should do them in person. So it's fair that you don't trust me at the moment, because your lizard brain tells you not to. And you know what, this is how we function, evolutionary. So if I tell you that I have like strong evidence towards that, a case study, a customer testimonial that you can call like 20 people that have worked with me that can vouch for me, you would be more likely to trust me. And it's all about just like creating, playing on your strengths and creating this evidence that you are a go-to person that could be trusted, at least like in service industry. But it happens all the time when you are doing like enterprise sales as well, right? Because they need to see it before they buy it, and they need to call people. Sometimes they will vet for you, you will have to go for a crew compliance. And that's why with some segments you don't have a fair fighting chance from a get-go. Maybe you can get it later when you are expanding your business, just like making sure that you have healthy traction and meeting other people in your life that can maybe do some introduction. But at the beginning, I like to set up people for success, because God knows that this go to market journey is quite intense, and I need to make it smoother, not harder for them.
Right, and it's a ton of risk. Going to market is a huge risk. So you're bringing down the risk factors and giving them focus. Those are the two things
It's
I
an act
might
of
that I
love.
see. Yeah,
Yeah. And
focus and that.
it's literally like from overwhelmed to hyper focused. This is a chapter that I had to delete from my book, but the initial idea was to do like the first chapter, which is like all about mindset. And when it comes to go to market, there is like so much fear of missing out. There are so many things to do. I mean, the nervous system, our nervous system go nuts. Maybe we don't sleep very well, maybe we don't eat healthily, we work too long. It's crazy. Like cortisol is bumping. But nevertheless, in terms of just like self management on this journey, we have to manage ourselves and our businesses as well. This is why I like to have these mental frameworks of just like saying focus, focus on one single direction, focus until you have generated the critical mass. Sometimes it will be a month of testing like LinkedIn posts, if you can like create this critical mass of cutting it through. Sometimes it will be 6 months if you are developing like an SEO strategy. But what is honorable for me is, can you stick to it? Like, do you have the character, do you have the discipline, do you have the stamina that you can stick with it for the period that you set? And I'm not encouraging people to be stupid and do stuff that is not producing any results, but you know what, from one TikTok post nobody went viral, almost. So sometimes you just have to bring in the muscle.
Hmm. And with going back to the proximity, the piece that I would attach to it is there's nuances. So it could be language, messaging, right? It could be style, design.
Oh my
It could
god,
be
yes.
like, there's so
It
many
can be even a
factors.
humor, it can even be
Yeah,
a joke.
it's just, and you don't get it, and then you totally turn off that whole audience because they clearly they know you don't get them. So, it's like, tell me if this is true. This is kind of what I explain to clients. I go, the best growth strategies aren't one big strategy. They're like little 1% or half percents stacked together, and the proximity is like one of those little 1%ers. That's like, I'm not fixing it as a massive idea. I'm just going, this is a super interesting differentiator that nobody really talks about, because everybody goes, well, it's always based on demand. What is your thoughts on meeting demand versus creating demand when you go to market strategy?
Okay, cool. Just like maybe a little intercept about proximity,
Okay,
because
sure, yeah.
I genuinely believe that the majority of marketers and salespeople in GTM has never seen like a customer in person. And I think this is like a huge gap. And if you have never like talked with these people, if you have never like had lunch with them, like spent some physical time together, how on earth can you sit in your office and writing white papers for them? I mean, I work with a lot of very like challenging verticals. So for example, with smart grids, this is electricity. And I just sat CTO down for 3 hours and he was explaining me everything about electricity. Was I interested in this? No, but I knew that I have to learn this in order to do my job decent, not well, but decent. And this was like a critical piece of information. I think it's very connected with like onboarding system and maybe gap between like the product and marketing and sales sometimes. But I have seen this problem again and again, especially like with people who are hiring either consultants or new team members, that people know shit about their vertical. And that's very, very, very concerning, because that's, for the sake of the word, I will use proximity. But like, it's, if you are selling to a freaking engineer of autonomous vehicles or something like that, you should know a thing or two about cars, right? It is unlikely that you will just like create stellar content marketing materials because you have seen a Tesla commercial. Very unlikely. So back to the demand generation and demand creation process that you were telling about. I think that I am more leaning towards demand capturing in GTM, especially if some demand is already available. So I don't mind, like, even when it comes to consulting businesses, like reporting to job posts when you are starting out. I don't do that personally, but they have like indicated some sort of interest, or like going to platforms where the demand is already like literally raising head to say, hey, I need some help with that. I mean, that's okay. And you don't have to like really necessarily create this huge content engine before you are even like in good condition to do it and you have like tangible data points to do that. So whenever possible, if the competitive landscape is not too broad, I would go with demand capture first. And I've seen this again and again in technology. Like Google Ads, for example, works wonderfully well for testing if you have like more on the text product and the end of the spectrum. But sometimes you are just like being so innovative, or the entry barriers in the industry are so high that you either have to address the segment which is being underserved in the existing competition arena, or you literally have to evangelize for your service, for your science. That's expensive. It takes a
Hmm.
long time and it's a huge sacrifice, and it's not a secure thing. I mean, if it works, it's beautiful, it's absolutely fantastic. But in order to do that, in go to market, we have 3 to 18 months. And realistically, I wouldn't expect any results from any content machines in less than 2 or 3 months. Like, this is time to learn. This is time to just like warm the channel a little bit. This is time to like navigate around and try to make sense what is going on. So I do think that people give up too quickly when it comes to that, and also that they haven't necessarily created the critical mass. Because what is important? It's important to be like 4 hours a day on LinkedIn if you want to achieve like 500,000 people organically a week. This is like literally the number that I tell you from my business. What else is important? It's important to have conversations with other industry leaders, such as yourself, Scott. This is really important, but that like we are not doing sales call today. It's just like networking and thinking in public together. That's an investment that we have to do in the business. And it's just like, I like to have businesses in good enough shape in order for them to consider investing in demand generation, which I think it's good. But before you can sell something legitimately on the market, it wouldn't be my first bet to say, hey guys, now we will go and we will write like 200 SEO articles. Okay, let's go. Never.
Hmm. Yeah, demand creation. I mean, it's so more expensive. It's also like you have to go through the cycle of early adopter innovators that are willing to do it. You got to go through the whole cycle, but you actually are trying to find a market that doesn't exist. where you're saying capturing market, which is meeting demand, or capturing demand based on especially if there's a market need that's not being filled. That is the
Yeah,
smarter way to go. The problem is most entrepreneurs today, they want to be the next Elon Musk, and they want to go, this is such a great new idea, nobody's done it. That's not necessarily, just because no one's done it doesn't mean it's great.
totally.
It's, and that's, I think, what a lot of I see anyways, a lot of people wasting a lot of money doing that.
Totally. And you said it beautifully, just like this enthusiasm. I mean, it's good for us. Like, it's good to be like enthusiastic about your business because business will be difficult and you need this enthusiasm, you need this energy. Like, this will get you through the chasm. But nevertheless, if you are in doubt that there is a competition, maybe the problem doesn't exist, or maybe it is sold very innovatively at the market by your customers. So I always trust the process of, not saying that I'm doing mom test interviews all the time, but I love to get this data. Okay, before you were considering buying this, who else did you contact? What other alternatives did you compare? And sometimes the alternative can even be like to do nothing or to use like a freaking spreadsheet. It's possible, right?
Mhm.
And that's your competition as well, for all I care. Do nothing.
What about if you are in what if you're competing in a very competitive market where it's almost commoditized? So, for example, you could argue, I'm in the business of helping people with growth, the growth marketing space. It's, I mean, I remember when I first said sustainable growth marketing, I don't think anybody had said it 10 years ago. Now I'm hearing it more often. What is the, like, well, how do you address like your go-to market strategy in the sea of sameness or commoditization, and trying to create differentiation? Like, what's sort of your perspective on that?
I think that you kind of answered this yourself beautifully. It's just like, people make decisions from rationals and irrational fields. And a lot of times, my clients just say, I love working with you because we share similar values. Of course, it's not a rational decision for them to work with me, but it's like intangible factor that without our relationship and just like without us talking together, we probably wouldn't establish, right? So as you do segmentation, you know that there is like psychographic segmentation, that like shared values and impact is being increasingly important, at least like for Gen Z, for all I hear from
Hmm.
them. And I think that you are just like on the right side of the history here in terms of just like standing out from this red ocean a little bit. I like that people have very strong point of views, right? Because if you are another person on LinkedIn who say that you should be like customer first and respect your team members, it's just like, okay, what else do you have to say to me? It's just, vanilla. I don't buy it. But whenever you kind of, and sometimes even from different fields of life, like the stupidest thing that happened to me in my career is that I literally think that like canine conditioning, which is a dog sport, this is like obedience training for dogs, is very applicable to HR as well, especially if you are just like training, because you have those core principles such as once is always, and just like whatever gets rewarded will get repeated and stuff like that. And you can get this inspiration for differentiation from different sort of life, right? So for example, for the book, I was sourcing a lot from the military strategy. Why? Not because like I would be pro-military or something like that, but I was just like thinking about this really pragmatically. Look, business strategy maybe exists for like 1000 years, if so. Military strategy, Sun Tzu, okay, that's going to be around for a very long time. Let's see what is like universally applicable and try to just like place it in this delicate go to market stage where there are like, I think that people are living in a same way as if they would be in crisis, because it's a survival mode. It's not like business as usual. You cannot spend like 6 months thinking which animal you are for branding. You need to get shit done. And just like, to circle back to your question, I think that you are so good at this, right? So sustainability and content creation, and you have like very strong unique point of views, so maybe push louder on them.
So that's the advice to people listening is like to, to just to be a little bit of a louder, maybe differentiated louder voice.
Yeah.
Is what I'm hearing you say. You mentioned something with the military, and that's interesting. So
Oh
did
God.
you
No, no,
the
sorry. You're from Canadian. You're from Canada. I shouldn't talk about this.
No, 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 no. It's cool because it's strategy, right? Like military strategy is a strategy. And so I use, and I don't know if you covered this in your book or if you're even aware of it. I'm sure you are, but it's the beachhead strategy. It's like what
Yeah,
Amazon did,
of
right? So to
course. It's
me,
my favorite.
that is one of my favorite strategies because
Yes.
it helps the owner. So a beachhead strategy, I'll give my description. I'd love to hear your expansion is the idea on think of Amazon. It started selling books, but now it literally is A to Z. Now they didn't sell anything. They sold only books at to start with, and then they went to the next. I don't know what's called the adjacent market. Like they would go to the
Yeah.
next one with CDs and stuff, right? So it's
Yeah.
the idea when you're
Media.
going to market, we try to sell everything
Love
and
it.
to focus the owner, the company, or the founders on product or services that you want to do is start with one that's your best beachhead, the lowest cost, and to be able to make the most impact. And then what can you do to map out to sort of relieve the pain that you want to expand services, but you want to make adjacent ones that make it easier to kind of build. That has been my go-to for my go. That's actually been my go-to market strategy almost all the
That's
time.
perfect. Me as well, because we are bootstrapping.
Yeah. So what? So do you have an expansion on that? Any nuances with that beachhead strategy?
Um, I would just love people to stick by it, because the thing is, that this audience, you should have a fair chance of winning it. It should be as narrow as you are bootstrapping as like 12 hospitals in London or something like that. And I know that nobody like went to business in order to do that, but at the same time, it is very critical that you can win over like at least half of those hospitals, like 6 hospitals in the next 6 months or so, because otherwise there is no business. And the biggest mental barrier that I see founders facing is just like this fear of missing out, or just like, oh, this is like too narrow for me. Maybe there are like other opportunities elsewhere. Oh, look at the squirrel. But nevertheless, I do think that training your focus muscle is the biggest challenge here. Rationally, they understand it. I mean, this beautiful diagram of just like circles with an interlap, it's logical, right? And it makes sense. This is how the Allies won the war in
Yeah.
France,
For those of
in
you listening, it would
Normandy.
be like pool cues, circles of pool cues, like in a triangle. That's what you're kind of visually talking about when they went and took a beachhead, right? It's like kind of looks like that.
Cool. And I do think that this adjacency is undervalued, because at least like in GTM, we need a little bit lever, right? There
Hmm.
are a lot of heavy stuff to do in business. So if our customers can recommend other customers, if we have good case studies to serve, that's good for us. We need some leverage. We appreciate some leverage. So just like this proximity of the segments, I think it's super important, because like we can only outspend our competitors to a certain point, then we eventually ran out of budget. But to have these growth loops embedded into the product, of just like, not saying that it will go viral, but you know how it is in every service business, like 60 or 70% of new business comes from referrals. This is normal. This is how
Hmm.
people buy and create trust. And if the product is good, that's one hell of a signal of a product market fit as well, if those recommendations are flowing.
And that's actually what I call the unseen wave of business growth, which is it really what it comes down to is the deliverability. If you are exceptional, if you are creating a transformational experience, it could be like transform the way that I look at buying, hotels. You think of that and Airbnb, or if I look at the transformation of when I used to drive a cab and take a cab, and then as soon as I used the Uber, I never wanted to use a cab again. It transformed my experience. So I was willing to tell everyone. That is what is sort of like what I'm describing this growth loop. When you listen, some of you listening when it says growth loop, a growth loop is you actually have some really good models that I saw in your LinkedIn. It's like maybe describe growth loops because this is actually what a groundswell is. It's a growth loop, but it's not the growth loop. It's one of many. And mine is based on deliverability of your service that it transforms. And for people that are trying to make impact on people's lives, especially people that are trying to make the planet better, people better, that has a natural tendency that people are compelled to share. But there's other mechanisms in marketing in your book that you describe that create these growth loops. Do you mind sharing, a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. I'll share a couple. So the first one is just like the collaboration loop, the collaboration growth loop. So for example, if Scott sends me a beautiful Figma file and I'm like maybe new to Figma, I would be immediately drawn to the product and just like eager to take it up for a spin. So he introduced me to the product, the same with like Loom maybe or Miro. This is how people collaborate. The second one, which is really, really, really interesting, is user generated loop, right? So, for example, there are a bunch of people who are sending me pictures of the book right now, and the biggest like user generated engine in the world is Google, because Google has written a line of content. This is just like an indexing mechanism for other websites to be listed. The other interesting example down this slide would be Pinterest. Then, like, there are a bunch of other loops, but probably you are waiting to hear the viral growth loops. So, when we are hoping that something will go viral, which is never a fair standalone bet, but you know how it is right now. We are recording in December, and a lovely company, Spotify, probably did a year in reverse video for you that you might be intrigued to sharing on social media, or just like these stories, weird cringe stories from Facebook, if you want to reshare them again or something like that. This is something which is like literally engineered for you to share. And like, nevertheless, we could be talking about other things as well. What is really, really, really interesting for me is just like thinking if we are delivering value with these growth loops, right? Because users will only be intrigued to give us the value back if we deliver the value. So in a way, it's a very like product-led growth. And if I have like a lot of joy looking from my iPhone, seeing like a video of my dog pics being generated there, it's a cool experience for me. But if Scott says to me, "Hey Maya, would you share my LinkedIn post and maybe you can win an iPhone?" Be like,
It's very transactional. Yeah, that's a transactional. That's where most people think of
exactly.
incentivizing, and it's transactional. So there's the transactional, emotional, and aspirational. And when you can go to
Yeah,
aspirational, where it's actually going to help the other person, that creates this intangible hidden growth loop, and that's what Groundswell is. Because I feel like if I want to pass on your book, which I have, I'm literally building a groundswell for your book because I'm going, this is a very good fucking book. Like it's really solid. So I'm telling to my community, I got 1,000 members. I'm going, hey, go take a look at this model. This is really great. I got to doing a podcast with her. That is
yeah.
me compelled to say because I'm going, this actually will help them and accelerate their business. So that's really what we're talking about. Most people think they can gamify it. What we're
Mhm.
talking about is creating the mechanisms. And your book really gives some really cool outlines of the mechanisms and options, but nothing replaces the value. And I think that's what I heard you say is it really comes down to the
To the
the
value
true
added.
value give. Yeah.
And curation, because especially in B2B settings, like you have your own community here. And if I wrote a book about Australian shepherds or something like that, we wouldn't be talking today. So it's all about this curation of responsibility, because these growth loops and these invites that we are getting from our personal networks, they have like a lot of weight of trust. They are really important, and this is like literally Scott vouching for a product or service to please somebody else. So people handle them with care. These the intelligent ones.
Mhm.
And that's why they usually work so well, because we self curate, right?
I call them self trust bubbles. So it's like when you're in the bubble of trust, but it's like when you have friends of trust,
Oh my God, you
then
have
you're
so
willing
many
to.
cool words.
Thanks. It's like it's actually the next book I'm writing is called Title Shift, and it's the my theory that I'm looking at researching, and this your product market fit go to market strategy might play into that a little bit, which is where I believe we're leaving the age of attention, where people are just trying to grab your attention, and we're moving into this
Hmm.
age of trust. And this
Hmm.
age of trust, no different than the beachhead strategy. Think of that as um, how you're going to be able to communicate your marketing is people are only going to buy based on the recommendation and trust of others, not recommendation engines. You don't trust those, not stars, 5 stars, or even customer reviews. It's going to be, does somebody I know that I trust can they verify that this is real and good? Because I think people's trust is
Totally.
collapsing right now, and that's why I love when you started this whole thing going, It would be so much better if a company stopped sending 1,000 emails and just talked to 100 people and did it personally, because that's like trying to building trust. That's what I believe we're moving into. It's very different. I think marketing is about to change dramatically, in my opinion.
I think transition is already happening because,
Hmm.
for example, like who would think 5 years ago that we could be B2B influencers? But I say to the majority of the deals, no, because I think that they are not a very good fit for my audience. And, I trust my audience, I respect them, and I want what's good for them. So, of course, as a content creator, I have to have like the audacity to say no more times than I say yes. If I think something is great for my people, I will take it for a ride myself first, and I will only recommend if I like it. And this is like type of partnerships that we are getting. If I betray this once, maybe they will forgive me. 3 times, definitely not. So it's literally playing around with your credibility and just like if you're a trustworthy character or not. And I mean, there are a bunch of awesome opportunities out there, but hey, here is the good news. We are not golden retrievers chasing squirrels. We are people with hopefully rational decision making. So, but just like knowing and comprehending these principles, we can like curate our content so much better, either on these trust bubbles that you said, or more importantly, to just like be authentic and honest towards each other. Because this is like bullshit is something that I don't stand. I am absolutely against this. And I think that increasingly people see through it. So, Scott, I think you and I are on the right side of the history here.
Thank you for that, and thank you for being my guest on my show. Like you've eloquently have said, and I know that English is your second language, and you speak
Oh,
just
it's a
great.
third one.
Third even, yeah, and just the way you're communicating is just off the chain. It's just incredible. So, if you could, where can people follow you, and what would you like them to know, to get more information about your book?
Fantastic, Scott. And also, like from my side, you are a fantastic host. It's so easy to chat with you. You have like
Oh,
this.
nice.
You're approachable and kind and warm person, so that makes it easier. Yeah, whoever is interested in getting more nuggets of GTM science, you guys are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have the website gtmstrategies.com. But hey, just connect on LinkedIn because I'm sharing it there as well. So thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest with your community members. I wish you the best of luck in the next year. And as I always like to say, do what's mission critical. What will most likely get you to the goal? These are the things that you should be prioritizing. So write it down and let's go. Let's work.
Love it. Thank you so much. And for all of you listening, thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of the Groundswell Origins podcast. If you have any ideas, suggestions that you want to pass on to me, or even a message you want me to pass on, then I'd be happy to do so. Just go to groundswell.fm and click on the recorder link and shoot me a voicemail. And until next time, mahalo.